Hello and welcome to Balancing Act, Life and Struggles of a Teenage Girl, a mental health and wellness and semi-unfiltered podcast made for teens by a teen. I'm your host, Morea, a 16-year-old girl from New York, and here on Balancing Act, I bring you weekly episodes featuring relatable conversations, personal stories, and practical insights to help you navigate life's balancing act and related challenges, and to remind you that you are not alone. Hello and welcome to this episode of Balancing Act, Life and Struggles of a Teenage Girl. In this episode, I am so grateful to have been joined by Tiff Cook, who is so cool. She's a boxer, a coach, and a podcaster. She's the host of Roll with the Punches podcast, where she dives into topics surrounding resilience, personal growth, and overcoming life's challenges, which is so cool. In this episode, Tiff and I had a great conversation about resilience and fighting through when things get tough and reframing your mindset when you encounter struggle. Tiff is a boxer, and we talk a lot about athletics and mental strength in athletics, but how all of that can also be translated into life and resilience outside of sports. In this episode, we share a lot about our own experiences in terms of struggle and triumph, and we work together to redefine what it means to win and to overcome mental barriers. This was such a meaningful conversation to have, and it's great if you need a little reminder that you're stronger than you think. And as you'll hear Tiff say in the episode, you're stronger than your circumstances. So let's get started. The name of your podcast is Rolling with the Punches. And so what does it mean to roll with the punches as opposed to like absorbing the punches or dodging the punches?
I reckon for me, it's all about learning how, like you use the word absorbing, and that's one that I use in terms of we try not to get hit. And in boxing, like I find boxing such a beautiful sport to create analogies for life because it's so physical and so visible. It's easy to describe something and go, oh, I see the metaphor in that. And when I talk about resilience and how to get tough, how to get okay with getting hit, like how do you, in the boxing ring, how do you learn not to get hit? How do you learn to protect yourself? Well, you step into the ring and you get hit and you get hit and you get hit and you get hit until you learn how to absorb the punches, till you learn how to get comfortable with them so that you can get hit less. But you've got to get hit first. There's so much gold in getting hit. There's so many gifts in the hard stuff. And it doesn't make it less hard, but for me, it makes me really grateful for the stuff that I see come out the other side of it.
I totally agree with that. I know that it takes me getting through a really rough patch in my life to realize how great the not so rough patches are, and then when the hard stuff starts to come back, then it seems a little less scary because while it's still hard, at least you've experienced it before. So, you said that it takes you getting hit to learn how to deal with getting hit again. So, what caused you to adapt this mindset? Was there any specific one time you remember getting really hit for the first time that kind of just made you adapt this mindset around what it means to get hit and how to move on from there?
Yeah, I reckon for me, I reckon it was a natural process that was happening beyond my conscious awareness when I was younger before I really put two and two together. And when I talk about boxing now and give talks, I often describe myself as having found this solution in boxing that I never knew I needed. I found the solution to a problem I never knew I had. It was like I stepped into the boxing ring under the facade of this bravado, like this girl that I'd moved from this small town Tassie to the city of Melbourne, and I was doing big things and being independent and being courageous and wearing the mask of someone who was all that. And then when I stepped into the boxing ring and started doing all this stuff, it made me start questioning like what is courage and what is fear And if I'm not scared of getting punched in the face like a lot of people are, what am I scared of? And those were big questions, and eventually I landed on things like connection and things like being seen, on being vulnerable, and I was like, "Oh," for so many years, my interpretation of courage and resilience actually is driven by the opposite. It's driven by fear of what's on the other side. So I'm pretending to be courageous, but really it's because I won't face vulnerability because I fear it. You can't be courageous without fear. And I think a physical sport or a physical thing or something you love that allows you to step into fear gives you something to build relationships on those type of physical and emotional experiences. How do I get comfortable with the sensation in my body of uncertainty and danger and threat and risk? How do I get comfortable with that? Well, I find a sport that I really love that evokes that I can wrap my mind around and then feel empowered. And then that empowerment, then in real life, when I get those reactions, when my body and mind goes, "You're in danger. There's something to fear here, and it's unreasonable and and irrational." I can start to wrap my head around it and build a new relationship with actually what's going on in my body, and I've trained for this. Now, how do I be the calm in the middle of the chaos that my mind's creating?
What do you tell yourself in those times where the world is so chaotic and where you're facing a threat in real life? Like, do you have any specific mantras that you might tell yourself? Like, I know you said, I've trained for this, but is there anything else that you remind yourself of when you're put in a tough position in the real world?
I think I've always had a sense that I'm tough enough to endure. And I wasn't a talented boxer. I was 29 when I first boxed, and I did it via a 12-week boxing challenge. So I literally said yes to a fight before I learned how to box, and the fight was in 12 weeks. It's not a lot of time. And as we trained for that, I wasn't coordinated, I wasn't talented, I wasn't any of the things. But what I held on to and what I knew without a doubt through the whole thing was I will be fitter, stronger, and I'll never give up. What I know is my mental strength and my physical strength and will can endure anything. And I think I hold on to that. I remember a year ago training for an event, and I was given a task to do, and it was it was grueling. It was 50 laps of some particular outdoor steps by somebody. They said to me, "You got to go down to this. It's called the Sandy Steps. You got to go. There's about 100 and something steps. I want you to do 50 laps, and you're going to do it in 50 minutes." And I did the first lap up and down, and I looked at my watch, and it was 90 seconds, which means I was going to go I was going to go an hour and a half, not 50 minutes. I was going to go an hour and a half, and I remember at 10 laps, my legs were shaking and I was thinking, "Okay, I'm not conditioned for this right now. Should I ring them and say, 'Look, this is a terrible goal. This is this is not gonna work.'" And then I just went into my mind and I went, "Is your body injured, or is this just deconditioned pain? Can you handle this?" And then in my head, my mantra, I just every time I took a step, I had this mantra, me an hour and 27 minutes in the end. And I was just chanting, "Every step is one more step. Every step is one more step." In life, the journey is won by one step at a time, by going just one more, just one more, just one more. And I find that in things like running. I did some running at that time as well. And I wasn't a runner, I didn't run. But every time this person gave me a time to run, I was like, "That's unreasonable." But I got the time and I bet the time. And I remember as I ran, I was just going, I believe that running is just how willing you are to be how uncomfortable for how long. And for that purpose, I was willing to be the most uncomfortable at the start of the run, and I was willing to maintain it until the run finished.
I can relate so much to that with the like just one more step because I'm on cross country, I'm a runner, and I've been overcoming a lot of injuries and a lot of setbacks and needing to stop running, and I'm just starting to get back into it. And it really hurts to see that my times are not anywhere near where they used to be. And just, like, the pain that comes when you're just starting to run again and feeling like I'll never get back into it, and then losing my motivation and stopping. I remember my first race of the season, I walked 5 times. How do you recommend figuring out what is, like you're saying, injuries and what is, like, your mind trying to tell you to stop? How do you overcome that urge when, like, your body is just, "I don't wanna do this," like, "My legs are burning, my breathing's getting so heavy," and your mind is just telling you to stop?
Yeah, that's an awesome question because I've had so many athlete conversations, and I think that because on one side we have listen to your body, on one side we go we can overtrain until we break ourselves, and so it's trying to find that balance between having the respect and knowing your body and holding the mindset. I have found really good and it takes takes a long time to find the right people, but I've found really good physical therapists, sports people who I trust in terms of injuries. So as soon as there's a niggle, I see them, I get an understanding, and they're people who don't stop me from training through pain. They understand the body in the same way. So there's a lot of physios and people that will say, "Oh, if your knee's hurting, don't run." I was training for that event last year doing all this running, and for years I couldn't run at all because I had shocking knees, and I'd started this running and my knees were fine, but then an old hamstring tendinopathy started to flare up and my knees started to get sore. So I went in to see my therapist, Brett, and he gave me some rehab, and then I forgot to ask about running, and I messaged him and I said, "I can't believe I forgot to ask you if I'm allowed to run." And obviously, I'm in my head, I'm thinking, "Of course I'm not. I've just gone in with knee problem, like 2 old injuries. Of course he's not gonna let me run." And he goes, "Oh, yeah, absolutely. But here are your perimeters. You are not allowed to reach a perceived level of over level 6 pain, and if the next day your pain increases, you can't run again until it comes back to whatever the baseline is now." So, really strict parameters on what is okay, understand the pain, and if it gets worse, we manage it. But if it doesn't, especially in a fighting sport, the mind is everything. The mind dictates what your body is capable of. So, you've got to kind of, for me, I think you have to balance the two.
Do you find that when you're trying to push yourself, you try to get more, like, into your mind and into your body, or do you dissociate? I know sometimes with endurance stuff, you're just like, "I wanna be as out of my body as possible so that I don't have to experience this pain," or do you, like, embrace the pain as you're going through it?
I'm going to say dissociation is a superpower. And again, because I did most of my learning and competing in combat sport, I realized a long time later that there was a huge level of dissociation. People couldn't read emotions because I wouldn't show them. I had a real poker face. But also I wasn't emotionally responding. And I think to a level I wasn't registering the physical pain in the boxing ring. So I was willing to walk in there and hurt. And the thing about boxing that's really beautiful that running doesn't have, I find running harder than boxing because you are so focused and distracted on offense and defense and movement and all of the things the chaos that is happening. When you're running, no one's chasing you. You are 100% responsible for the pain that you're feeling, not the other person. So I find that can be a much tougher mental game, especially fitness wise. I would say I could never have ever gotten as fit as I have been in moments by doing any other type of training than boxing because you're so distracted in the performance that you stop and go, "Oh, I'm really tired." Like, I've just worked really hard because you just push through it. You have to separate what does my body feel like with this exertion. You have to get pushed past that. That can't matter to you. The only thing that can matter to you is I'm watching what is the strategy I'm doing, how am I controlling this fight, how am I responding and reacting. So there's no brain space to be worried about, am I gonna, one more step, just push hard.
Yeah. No, that makes so much sense because running, you're just focused on that pain you're feeling, and there's no,
Yeah.
like, strategy or, like, steps that you're trying to focus on. all your mind goes back to is the pain. And I know that
Yeah.
boxing is like a huge metaphor for the rest of life in general. So is there a way that that lesson about having so many other things you're focusing on as you're working through the pain, like how does that reflect into real life? Is there any real life experience or thing that you think mirrors that feeling of boxing versus running?
So I remember being really intrigued by wanting to continue boxing. So I was used to be a real do something, be awesome at it, do the next thing, be awesome at it, get bored, do the next thing. And what I found interesting is I did this boxing fight and I didn't feel good at it for a start. So I was like, "Oh, that's interesting in itself." But I wanted to do another fight. I wanted to keep boxing after I'd done that. And I was like, "Oh, I don't, I don't normally stick at things. What's this all about? Why?" And I think one of the big things is there's so many aspects that you can face the fact that, gee, I don't think my footwork's getting better at all because we never see our own progress. But then in the middle of that, you can go, oh, you can ignore that negative inner critic about that and go, yeah, but I can go and hit harder. I can learn this technique. Yeah, but my pad work's getting really good. So you can kind of abandon momentarily the things that you feel because there's other stuff to focus on. And I think for my mind, to have all of those different parameters was really great for me. It was like, well, I can just abandon that for now. And then I focus on this over here, and it's all part of the same game. And that's relative to life. Like, I was working full time throughout my first 3 or 4 fights, and I would have, a couple of fights a year. And I remember just getting so obsessed with the sport that I would leave work early and get to training, and I was just training obsessed, thinking about boxing all of the time. I was doing my job, but I was like boxing was the thing I talked about all of the time. And in my mind, I thought that you're kind of putting work second, like, you're not doing a very good job. But when I looked back, my my performance as an employee improved because I was learning dedication, I was learning to walk into hard things, I was learning to show up when I didn't wanna show up, and those things were just transferring into my life because I was doing it in the boxing ring because you don't have a choice. When you're tired and you don't sleep well and you don't feel good, you have to go to training anyway because there's an expectation because 'cause you've got work to do. And so I think that just naturally transfers into your life.
I totally agree with that because for me, I didn't do sports until like I started high school and I was lifting weights in 8th grade and pushing through that discomfort when like the weight feels really heavy, but you still have to stand up and do a few more reps with it. Like that helped me to learn discipline in other aspects of my life. But I guess on the flip side, if there are times where you do fail in athletics where your discipline breaks, that can wreck your mental fortitude and your self-image, and I know that, the times where I stop running or I give up in the middle of a workout or a race, it makes me feel like I'm not only incapable at running, but that I'm bound to fail at other aspects of my life because my discipline has broken just in all aspects of who I am as a person. So what would you recommend somebody do to bounce back in moments like that where they find themselves giving up and they're like, "Well, I gave up, so I guess everything's lost now."
Yeah, I'm always talking about how we process and talk to ourselves, and I remember winning doesn't always feel like winning, and I've felt this in running recently, but I remember really clearly, years ago, I was sparring at a particular gym, and I was sparring with a girl who she had 10 years more experience than me. She was a little bit heavier, a few weight divisions heavier, and she was really good boxer. And we were doing some rounds that day, and I just felt like I was getting pummeled. And I sat down afterwards, and I was just really down on myself. I was really frustrated. I was like, "Oh, that's just such a terrible performance." And my coach comes over and he goes, "What's the matter with you?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm frustrated. I was just having a bit of a whinge." And he goes, "That's that's the best you've ever sparred, and no one has ever put that much pressure on Carly in this gym." And I was a novice, like, I'd only had a handful of fights, she'd had a lot. And I just looked at him and I go, "This what a shit sport, eh?" I've just performed better than I've ever performed, and I've put high pressure on someone that's a lot better than me, and yet in my mind, it was a terrible performance. And I know this year when I've been running, I've just been doing light runs, not looking at times, not trying to just doing runs for enjoyment. And what I noticed, which I found really interesting, is I do the first kilometer. I go out and I run at it. I put a running soundtrack on, so I'm running at the same cadence, and that's all I know. And I just run at the pace that feels the same. And one day I'll get to 1 kilometer, and my watch will beep, and it will say 5 minute Ks, and I'll be like, "Oh, that's that's pretty quick for right now." And then the next day, I'll go out and I'll do the same run at the perceived same pace, and it'll say 6.5 minute Ks, and I'm like, "But I feel like I'm running at the same pace." So our perception of performance is a really fickle measure of our performance. And I know that 2 years into boxing, I was really frustrated that I wasn't improving and everyone else was, until I looked back at old footage and went, "Oh, I've improved a lot." So I just think, yeah, you gotta tame that voice, and you've gotta control what you are hearing yourself say, and because that will impact your performance, it will impact the effort that you put in.
Totally. I know that I and a lot of the other athletes I'm around, we beat ourselves up when we don't get to where we want to be, but then we don't look at all the progress that we've made. And then we, like, start spiraling with our thoughts, and we're like, you know, "Well, I guess I'll never be there, so why try at all?" And then we give up, and then we don't realize how well we were actually doing.
And the fight is won with what you do when you don't feel like doing it. Like, we can all perform when we feel good. We can all do a PB when we get up and we feel motivated, when we feel good. There was once I went into sparring, and I was sparring one of the boys at the gym, and he's obviously far better than me. He's stronger. He's a pro boxer. He's southpaw, so he's left-handed. So he's really challenging for me to spar. And I went in this day, and I'd only had 2 hours sleep. I was having massive sleep issues. I had to get up at 4:30 in the morning and do a 5 hour shift, physical shift at work. And then I drove an hour down to training. And as I pulled up, I just hit an energetic wall, and I was like, "Oh, I shouldn't have come here. If I felt like this before I left the house, I definitely wouldn't have." And I dragged myself into the gym, and I was like, "This is not gonna be a good session." And I sparred the best I have ever sparred. I performed the best I'd ever performed, and I was like, "Oh." And it's those moments, right? You can't do that all the time. Obviously, training on 2 hours sleep is silly, but it's so important to do it sometimes. It's so important to sometimes go, "Yeah, I haven't slept last night, but I'm still gonna get up and I'm still gonna go for that PB today," just because it's really important that my mind knows that sometimes it's stronger than my body and my circumstances.
Wow, that's so meaningful because I was struggling with a lot of sleep stuff last year because I was dealing with depression and then an eating
Mm.
disorder, so I was also suffering from, like, malnutrition because I was just starting to recover, and so I wasn't sleeping and I was spiraling, and I'm like, "I'm gonna fail at everything because I'm not getting enough sleep, my body's in a really crappy place, I don't know what I'm gonna do." And sometimes I just let everything go, but then in the end, I tried to reel it all back in and tell myself that I'm stronger than my body and my circumstances, like you were saying. And I
Yeah.
feel like that's something that I'm gonna repeat to myself when I'm feeling crap. The circumstances don't change who I am as person, and while they might make it harder for me to do things, they don't eliminate the possibility of me filling my potential.
Yeah, yeah. Like, I've had a really like, I'm 41 now, so, this year for me, my energy and my response to training has just gone AWOL. And I've had to change a lot of things, and the toughest part of that was getting my mind around its own expectations and its own judgments on particular activities and the way that I do them and the length of time I spend doing them and the frequency that I do them. And because that comes down to identity. And the thing we have to manage when we are using a sport or a behavior or a thing to manage our health and our mental health is our identity. Are we just feeling good? But, like there was a time where it was like, well, who is Tiff if she's not a boxer? To go into training and then start to not respond to training and need more time off, and then training disrupts my sleep, and I'm like, okay, something's shifted and changed in my body that wasn't acceptable before, and I was like, well, it's not about whether or not it's acceptable because it's happening. Tiff's not a boxer. Tiff's a human being. How do I continue to do the sport I love, get the best out of myself when just doing the hard thing and just being the fittest all of the time is no longer healthy. It's no longer the option.
That resonates with me so much because at the end of last year, I had to stop running because my body was just absolutely falling apart. And I've always struggled with tying my self-worth to external things, external validation, compliments from other people, my grades at
Mhm.
school, and then my athletic performance. And it's like if I can't excel in one thing, then I have to excel in the other. And then here I was, my athletic performance absolutely plummeting, like not being able to sleep. And so my academic stuff just totally was crashing, and it's so hard to figure out who you are when for so long you've tied so much of your identity to doing other things like saying, "I'm a boxer," or "I'm a runner," "I'm an athlete." And so how have you been working to I mean, you're still a boxer, but how do you work to recenter or redirect your self-worth and where how you tie it to other things so that it's less, like, flimsy and kinda, like, flying around?
Yeah, it's an ever present process, I think. And God, like I am so envious that I wasn't sitting where you are at your age. Like, I was 29 when I stepped into the boxing ring, and it wasn't until after then that I started to develop any level of self awareness. I always spent some time on mindset and personal development. For me, the people who I choose to be around is really important because we will become, think like, talk like, behave like those who surround us. So I often look at when things are going well or when things aren't, or when something continually about my life or progress frustrates me, I start to look at who am I spending my time with at the moment and what are their words and thoughts and behaviors that I'm consuming because we take that in, right? And what are my thoughts and words? Like there's self awareness, having an awareness on how do I think? How do I talk to myself? The things that I'm complaining about, am I actually taking action towards them or am I just expecting them to fall into place one day? And I'm my own, like everyone is, I'm my own worst enemy. Just about to, in this weekend, I'm about to go to India on a retreat with a bunch of people. And I'm so excited because I desperately need to get out of the everyday, day to day and sit back with different people and look back on my life and go, okay, what's working and what's not? And what am I doing well? And who am I? Like to always ask yourself the question, well, who am I? Because it was really interesting those first few years of boxing. And my best friend and housemate, she was a boxer too. And we were both just boxing obsessed. And I used to look at her and sometimes she would put everything into boxing, everything. And it meant so much. And sometimes I would look at the pressure and I would think, especially in Australia, like women's boxing in Australia, like nobody knows who we are, especially amateur fighting. Like something that big and to yourself, it feels like everything. Like this fight, and because there's so much emotion in it and so much adrenaline, then you go, this fight means everything, and your whole identity and the level of emotion that's attached to that is insane. And at the end of the day, you have to sit back and go, if I lose this fight today, my friends, I mean, they'll be like, "Oh, that's disappointing," but that it doesn't mean anything to them. It only means that much to me, and then I have to ask myself, "Why does it mean so much to me? Am I gonna turn it into something empowering, or am I just hooking my identity on it for a feel good for now? And so, yeah, ever present challenge, I think just understanding our identity, really.
I totally relate to that, and I think that a lot of teenagers can also relate to that idea of tying your identity onto just a certain win or a certain battle. I know that it's kind of reminding me of, like, high school tests, and it's like, here's a test, and I'm probably not gonna remember it in 20 years, and it's kind of small in comparison to everything else, but in the moment, it's like the adrenaline, the stress, and it's, "This defines my life, and if I fail it, then, well, there goes my whole identity as a good student." But like you're saying, your friends are not really gonna change their perspective of you if you bomb a test, which probably won't actually happen because sometimes anxiety makes things seem like they're gonna be worse than they actually are. But
Mhm.
it's so true. But in the moment, it can still feel like so intense. So do you find that you're actually able to completely convince yourself that, you know, losing this won't change my entire identity, because I know that no matter how much you repeat it to yourself, it can be so hard to truly believe that.
I found in the last fights I had, I perceived boxing like you're stepping into the ring on one day with one person, and whoever performs the best that day wins, and coupled with that, sometimes judges judge on completely different things, bad decisions, not all judges see the same thing. So, I already had this really flexible idea of just because you get the win doesn't mean you win, doesn't mean you're the best, it just means you on the day those people said yes. And so I went into fights, and my last couple was interesting is my second last fight that I had a big break, went back. My first one, on the day, my opponent got changed, and I ended up fighting a girl 10 kilos heavier than me, and I went in and I got the win, and I got a unanimous win, but I was so disappointed with how I performed. I didn't perform or box the way that I was in sparring. I was so disappointed with myself, and I was so gassed and so sloppy, and so in the next fight, I was fighting a girl who had way more experience. She was like 50. She was a world champion in kickboxing. We're having a boxing fight, but this was my first 5-round fight, and it was for an Australian title, and I just wanted 2 things. I wanted to not gas the way, and, like, I had, like, adrenal dump. So I wanted to not experience that, and I wanted to box well. I just wanted control. I didn't wanna lunge the way that I was. I didn't wanna be sloppy. I lost the fight on a split point decision. I got through 5 rounds, and I felt like I could have done another 10. And I was so happy with my performance that you could have sworn I'd just won the Aussie title, because I'd controlled what mattered to me. 'Cause I had 2 things that mattered, and if I didn't overcome, like, the win didn't matter. It was the fact that I got past this point of frustration. These are the 2 things that matter to me. This is what I want to achieve. You couldn't have taken that joy away from me if you tried. So I think, yeah, understanding, I think just being aware, right? You would just be curious. Oh, I notice, and not but noticing that you have an unhealthy attachment to sport at a particular time. The worst thing you can do is then let that negative narrative run riot on you. It's okay. I notice that right now I've got a bit of an unhealthy attachment to this. I wonder what's driving that. I might just sit back and observe that. I might just try and figure out what's going on, and I'll just gradually step back from that and try and write a new narrative about it.
That's so interesting, and, like, the way that you were setting your own goals, and it's you're not going off of what somebody else might determine as a win or what was actually called, like, the win, but it was just about
Mm.
you performing the way that you wanted to perform, and that can be applied to so many other parts of life, and you don't have to win everything for it to still be considered a win for you,
Mm.
and
Mm.
just yeah, I'm definitely gonna use that to shift my own mindset in the future because I'm a bit of a perfectionist, and so when I'm hit with challenges, I'm like, I have to 100% ace every single aspect of this. But then maybe realizing that not every single thing has to be completely just slam dunk, and that it's okay if you just nail the parts that were really, really important to you. And so
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, so this is a question that I like to ask everyone who comes on the podcast, but if you could give your teenage self one single piece of advice, what would it be?
Oh, that's a good one. I don't know if I would have listened to myself as a teenager. I
Yeah.
often say if someone had have come to me before I'd made my own realizations in boxing about what I really feared, if someone come up to me and said, "Hey, you know how you think you're independent and courageous and strong, you're actually terrified. You're terrified and you're running away." I would have told them to get stuffed. And I kind of feel and I kind of don't do regret. I don't do change because every choice I made, everything that I went through and chose to do is gold now. Because not only did it lead to who I am now, it's given me context. Every time when I've made less than optimal decisions and choices, I reference them now, and because I do coaching and I'm coaching other people and I'm curious about human performance. We need that. We need that in order to understand how to make good decisions. You can't learn how to make good decisions if you've never made bad ones or if you won't admit you've made bad ones. So I don't reckon I'd tell myself anything. I'd just let myself meander through life like I have, running
Yeah.
into things.
If you were just to, if your life were to be one just like straight perfect line, that would be pretty boring. And like,
Yeah, yeah.
uh, it really, I guess, everything that your podcast and like roll with the punches, if you didn't let yourself get punched at all, and if like where would you even be? How would you grow if nobody punches you and tells you, "Hey, you have something to work towards."
I guess there's one thing I'd love to know then that I believe now, and I believe this through having the conversations I did on the show because I started by talking to people who have been through stuff, hard stuff. And then I was also interested in high performance, people that had done incredible things, ultra marathons and crazy things that they've achieved in life. And I realized really quickly I'm not talking to two different types of people. I'm talking to the same people and I'm having the same conversations. It's just the cover that on people's metaphorical book. It's how they tell the story. I think understanding that when you look at someone and you want what they've got or achieved, or you see them getting to great heights, I think you have to assume that there's an equal amount and depth of struggle that has propelled them there. So you can't want and envy what you see in others without giving them credit for what they went through in order to develop the mindset or achieve the thing. And people will look at you the same. So, all the hard stuff that you go through, people don't see that unless you tell them, but they'll be looking from the outside in with you on a pedestal going, I wish did what she does.
I feel like just the way that we view other people, you don't know what anyone's struggling with. You don't know what anyone's been going through unless they tell you. And then, like you're saying, we put other people on pedestals and make ourselves feel bad. And just comparison is so, so tough. And so,
Mm.
just, before we wrap this podcast up, is there anything that we haven't covered that you think would be really important for teenagers, especially teenage girls who are listening to this, who feel like they've been a little punched by life and they don't know how to recover from it?
Just think the idea that the best stuff is the worst stuff and the worst stuff is the best stuff. We label things good and bad, but that's just a story we wrap around it. Whether or not it's good or bad depends on which angle you're looking from and which part of the story you're sitting in, which armchair you're looking at it from. So I think being mindful when we judge or even talk about what's happening and what we're going through, we have these emotional reactions. Then we go, oh, this happened. It's really bad life. And it's not, because every time something really bad happened in my world that was unexpected, it was the biggest opportunity. COVID came, I had gyms, they shut down. I thought this could be bankruptcy for me. This could be the financial end of Tiff Cook. And actually, it catapulted me into doing this podcast, becoming a speaker, finding next level me. And oh my, the only thing I fear more than going through what I went through is if that didn't happen, thinking about the monotonous place I'd be in right now doing what I was doing before and not having the guts to step up. And sometimes the hard stuff makes us step up. I'm not saying it's good, it doesn't always feel good, but just know that it makes us step up and that there's good stuff coming out of it.
That's such an important message because you gotta roll with the punches, you gotta grow from them. You can't just be sad and sit in the corner and cry and think that everything's over because I guess that's what really that's what really screws you over if you give up after getting punched instead of
Yeah,
taking a step back and looking at it as an opportunity like you did. Yeah.
yeah.
So thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. This has been just such a meaningful conversation in terms of talking about stuff that I'm going through. And I know that so many other teenagers and teenage girls can relate to this because the fact is, we all get punched by life sometimes, and it's
Mhm.
not fun. And it can be hard to bounce back from that and get back in that boxing ring and just get back at life.
I love it. Think you might have to come for a chat on my show, mate. I think you've got some great stories and messages to share on yourself, so I would love to have you.
My gosh. Oh my gosh is right. I guess you'll have to stay tuned for an episode on Tiff's podcast, Rolling with the Punches. But back to the episode you're listening to right now. Here are my biggest takeaways from our conversation. 1. When things get tough, you just have to take it one step at a time. It can feel so overwhelming if you try to imagine tackling the challenge all at once. So take it one step at a time. You'll get there. My next biggest takeaway was the importance and the strength of mental resilience. The story we tell ourselves matters. If we tell ourselves that we're going to fail, sometimes we don't even want to try. It's important to know that you're stronger than your circumstances and that sometimes you just want to give up, but you really don't have to. Circumstances may make it harder for you to do something, but they don't make you completely incapable. 3. Redefining a quote unquote win. Our perception of our performance can be so skewed. Sometimes we get so caught up in being perfect that we can't even see how much we've already achieved. And then on top of that, the quote unquote win may not actually be what you're going for. Outline what your goals are and control what matters to you. Even if you don't achieve what other people are calling the quote unquote win, you can still win. 4. Reflecting on who you are. When you feel yourself getting so caught up in a certain battle that may not actually matter all that much, consider why you're tying so much of your self worth to that event. Is it necessary? Will your friends think any less of you if you appear to lose this fight? 5. Redefining struggle and failure. Getting punched hurts, but struggle and failure can help you to grow so much, even if it doesn't feel great. No one achieves great things without a fair amount of struggle. But we can't always see that struggle, and so we end up putting other people on pedestals. In the moment, we have such emotional reactions to what we're going through, and so we label things as good or bad, but it's really all just a matter of perspective. Struggling helps us to evolve as people, and it opens so many doors you may have never even known had existed. Imagine how boring life would be without struggle. It hurts to struggle. Overcoming struggle isn't usually straightforward, and there will be days where you feel like things are slipping backwards. But at the end of the day, you need to trust yourself and your own strength, and that can be hard. And just know that you'll be stronger when you make it out the other side, and you will make it through. Thanks again for sticking around to the end of this episode, and I hope you'll stay tuned for my guest appearance on Tiffany Cook's Roll with the Punches podcast, which I will eventually link in the description. Thank you for listening to this episode of Balancing Act: Life and Struggles of a Teenage Girl. If this episode resonated with you, or if you know someone it could help, please feel free to share it with your loved ones or on social media. You can find us on Instagram at balancingact.podcast or on our website balancingact.life, which are both linked in the description. If you really want to support the podcast, leaving us a rating, hopefully a good one, on Apple Podcasts or Spotify would be invaluable. If you have any questions or comments about this episode, or if you want to suggest a topic or person for a future episode, please feel free to reach out to us through social media, our website, or email, which you can find on the website. Thanks again for taking the time to listen. I hope you have an amazing rest of your day, and remember, life's a balancing act, and sometimes you fall on your face, but you are not alone.